What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Overstated NBA Show. As you can see, Steve is not with us today. It's just Jacob and myself, but I think we've got a pretty good episode in store for you guys. Sorry, I can't talk. That's why Steve's the host. But this is a topic that we've been talking about, potentially addressing for a couple of weeks. It's something I've thought about before, and I know Jacob's thought about. It's something that we talk about all the time. But I don't think we ever really explore it in depth enough. And that topic is that of player primes. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. But I probably should have asked you right off the bat, how are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm doing good. Recording in a different spot right now. You can't see the plants anymore, but yeah, 'cause it's 11:30 over here. Feeling good though. Feeling good. Been traveling all day. This mop top on, it's all sunny and shit as well. Feeling that Californian life for a change.
That's what's up, man. I can see the plant.
Can
plant
you?
on my screen. Yeah. Yeah. So for the listeners, we attempted to do this on a different recording platform just now, and it booted me out of the session. And so we had to resort back to the old one that we use, and the screens look a little different. This one's not as great, but hey, if it works, it works. And that's kind of the hope at this point.
Yeah.
Let's just get through this.
Yeah.
So we should probably just jump right into this one, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good place to start is like, how do we define prime? Okay, because we talk about prime all the time. Prime this and that. Prime Jordan. Prime Bird. Prime Barkley. Whatever. We say it all the time, but like, what does that actually mean when we say that? Because it feels a little unspecific.
It is, and that's one thing about the term that really annoys me is that something like peak, you can kind of prize out a peak, but something like a prime is like with Jordan, like you say, like Jordan in 1998, probably still the best player in the league. And he's like 10 years deep into being the best player in the league, but is he still in his prime? Like, is 1998 Jordan still the prime version of Michael Jordan? He's the best player in the league, or are we comparing the prime versus the player themselves? So, the highest point you reach is kind of setting the standard of your prime, and everything else is relative to that. Or is it, because then, yeah, Michael Jordan hasn't been in his prime for like 5 years by 1998, but he's still probably the best player in the league. So how do we define the idea of a prime?
Yeah, that's interesting too, thinking about it like that. Like, do we look at it in relative to the rest of their career? And we'll talk about LeBron later for sure. But I think that comes up with him as well. When we, is it relative to everybody who's come before him, or is it relative to his own brilliant career? But I think with Jordan, an interesting distinction that sort of comes into focus is that between athletic prime and basketball prime. Okay. I feel like when we say prime, a lot of times we're thinking or talking about athletic prime. And obviously Jordan was out of his athletic prime. Okay. But by the time he even comes back from baseball, 1990, 94, 95. But if we're talking about basketball prime, and we've talked about this actually, I think when we did our wine cellar draft, where like, I think I went with 95, 96 Jordan, and you were saying that's not the best version of Jordan.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. Cause I think he was so much smarter, better at shooting, stronger, wiser, all that stuff. Even though he wasn't the athlete he had been 5 years earlier, he was still athletic enough. And I think when you combine that, like, to me, that's the best version of Jordan. And I think that's what that gets at is like, yeah, he's out of his athletic prime, but because his basketball skills have actually gotten better, at least his basketball IQ, does that mean he's still in his prime, or could we sort of subdivide a prime between their athletic prime, their basketball prime, and then how much of an overlap is there between those? I just think Jordan's kind of an interesting case study in that regard.
Yeah, I think once you get to the guys who are just naturally the best of their era, you get a Jordan or a Kareem or a LeBron, they can end up having this kind of multiple prime because they hit their athletic prime, like Kareem in like 71, 72. He's the best player in the league. And then maybe he hits his actual skill prime later when he's, 29, 30. Same with someone like LeBron. Like LeBron is probably the prime example for me because I'd say he hits his like true athletic prime in like 2009 at about 24. But then he hits his actual 2013 is when he's 28. And then 2016 is when he's 31. So you've got this kind of range of, is 2016 the savvier, maybe better in the clutch LeBron, better than 2009 LeBron, where he's objectively faster and strong and quicker. Maybe not stronger, but definitely faster, more explosiveness. Is he better than that LeBron? Even though that LeBron had all the physical advantages that 31-year-old LeBron has slightly less of. It's tough, and those type of players are slightly different, I think, as well to normal players.
Yeah, and there's a few, and they're obviously the most special players that we've seen. I think Hakeem Olajuwon is another interesting one like that, because Hakeem's athletic prime was probably the late 80s, very early 90s, but his prime as a player, I think overall was like 93, 94, 94, 95, the championship seasons.
He's in his 30s.
And again, he was like 30, 32, 31, probably the first one, 32, the second one. And even the year after that, like 95, 96, he was still pretty damn good. Like he was one of the guys who really extended his prime. But again, that was more of him just really mastering the game of basketball. He's still athletic. Again, it's a lot like Jordan, but he's not nearly as athletic as he was when he was 26, 27. So it's like with special players like that, Jordan, Olajuwon, LeBron, and a few others we could certainly name. Is it like sort of the midpoint of that convergence of athletic prime and like basketball IQ prime or basketball mastery, like sort of that midpoint there, which I think for Hakeem would be like 93, 94. For Jordan, I think it probably 95, 96. I think it would have been the year he missed, the full season he missed, but I think 93, 94 would have been a sick version of Jordan, like disregarding all the burnout stuff that everyone likes to talk about. Oh, he needed a break. I don't know. But disregarding that, I think that would have been a monster season for Jordan.
Oh, no doubt. But so I did some research into all of this, and one thing that really stuck out to me doing the research was the idea of kind of when death begins, which is a bit of a morbid thing to say, but basically you aren't technically dying until you reach about the age of 26. And the reason why that's true is because until the age of 26, you are creating more cells than are dying every year in your body. And at the age of 26, it goes the other way. You start creating less cells, more of them begin dying, and that is when, your physical peak is at about 26. So there's been this whole concept that kind of athletes peak when they're 26. It slowly drops until you're about 30, 31, and then you fall off a cliff, kind of at 31, 32, 33, etc. That's when you fall off a cliff. But skill-based and intelligence-based, kind of the knowledge of the game, like LeBron's built up over time, that just keeps going up. If the person's committed to learning, they'll keep learning throughout their whole career. That's something Kevin McHale hit on as well. He said that if he had his brains that he has now as like a 60-year-old man when he was a player, he reckons he'd be one of the best players ever because he thinks he knows so much more about the game now than he did when he was playing. But obviously he doesn't have the physical attributes. So generally people are saying kind of that 26 to about 30 age is about the prime of a player, which makes sense when you think kind of it's that convergence between skill level and physical drop-off as it falls. One thing that always stuck out to me, though, and I think I told you this on like a live stream, I was doing a kind of looking at, right, what was someone's best 1 year stretch, best 2 year stretch, best 3 year stretch, going all the way out to like 15-year stretches. One thing that in like 200 players, I think it was 150 of them, their best 10-year stretch was from the ages 23 to 32. That was their best for like nearly every single player. It was 23 to 32 is your 10-year peak, kind of the best 10 years of your career, which makes sense. And then you zoom a bit closer in, and I found that kind of a higher peak than that was about 24 to 30 is like a step up. That's when you reach kind of the highest levels of the game is from like 24 to 30. And then you step up from that and it gets to about 27 to 29. 27 to 29 is like absolute prime. And within that, 27 is the prime. Just to give you some ideas of seasons that when the 27 club of basketball players, Kobe's 2006, Magic's 1987, Jordan's 1991, Shaq's 2000, Steph's 2016, Kevin Garnett's 2004. Like there's like most players hit their prime. I would say all those guys that those were their prime years when they were 27.
So because that was good, like how you sort of narrow it down, because you've got this 10-year thing. Like, is that really their prime, or that's just kind of like the best 10 years of their career? And then you narrow it down. Like when I think of prime, I think of like 5, maybe 6 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you narrow it down to 27 to 29, or even more specifically, like 27, I think that's peak. And like, that I think that's kind of an important distinction to make too, is that between peak and prime, because I think those two terms are used synonymously quite often. But I think there should be a difference between them, because a peak is whether it's one season or maybe 3. I don't think it can be any more than like 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think prime is a little bit more broad, where to me, I think of that as like 6 years, like 24 to 30, 25 to 31, maybe nowadays. So that's interesting. Well, I mean, let's look at, all right, who's 27 right now? There's one guy on my list that I came up with that's 27. There's a couple guys that are close.
Right now, because I did have these guys, AD is currently in his prime season, or should be in his prime season right now, which is annoying because when he's been on the court, he's been a little underwhelming, and obviously he just hasn't been on the court all that much. That's the biggest thing. And then Embiid was the other one. He's a little younger than AD. I think AD might have just turned 28, but it's his age 27 season. Mm-hmm.
Embiid is actually 27. So those were actually like the two guys in that range, which Embiid is having the best season of his career. Again, when he's been on the court, he's been playing at an MVP level. So that certainly rings true with that. And then just Giannis and Jokic are both 26.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, they're pretty much at the peak of their powers.
Yeah. And Kawhi's 29. He should be still in his peak, like just about, because they range like 27 to 29. One thing to add on to that idea I had but then I tried, because that was for all players. Then I thought, right, I'm going to break it down into bigs, wings, and guards and see, can I see any more kind of little just interesting things to note?
Nice. I was wondering about this.
When I broke it down into bigs, wings, and guards, bigs tended to skew earlier. So guys like Shaq, probably by the time he's 30, that's 2003. Like, Shaq is still a monster when he's 30. He's not Shaq by that
2003-04 was the year where he really started to fall off. Yeah. And then when he got to Miami, he was still good, but he wasn't what he was.
Shaq,
yeah. He had a pretty steep drop between I think it was 02-03 and 03-04. I'm pretty sure it was those 2 years where he really did. He was only 30.
Yeah, he was 30.
No.
You got to think guys like Dwight Howard, obviously injuries curtail that, but he was quite young. Tim Duncan actually he peaked relatively young. Like, his MVP years were 25 and 26, which is that's quite young. Whereas someone like Kareem, if you want to take 71 and 72, he was 23 and 24. He peaked slightly younger. So I found bigs tend to skew younger, but then there are even Wilt, like he must have been maybe 31, 30. What was his 67 season? He was probably 67 was 30 on the
30.
dot.
Because after that, he sort of started to fall off. That was his last, Wilt level season, really. And obviously his first few seasons he was ridiculous, superhuman. Again, that's tough to look at that era. Like, it's hard to say. There could be various reasons for that, but I don't think there's any question. Even he started to fall off earlier than most. And Duncan's an interesting one too, like because Duncan by age 30 was not the same player he was when he won the MVPs. He didn't play the same way. He was still great, but he wasn't an MVP caliber player.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of guys are. Jordan was, Karl Malone was. Like, you can get into those guys too. But yeah, that rings true though. That Biggs hit it earlier and kind of come out of it earlier.
The only guy that kind of bucked this trend, and we hit on him earlier, was Hakeem, who hits it later, but he comes to basketball a lot later than most of these guys. And he is very clearly learning the game in the NBA as he's going along. And and the team, the malpractice of the Houston Rockets in that era, for all we know, in 1990, Hakeem may have been the best version. He just didn't have the team around him to succeed. Like, we don't know.
It's one of the all-time most frustrating things to me is those teams because it never gets talked about. Everyone loves to talk about Kevin Garnett with the Timberwolves and how they squandered his best years, or even like LeBron, his first stint with the Cavs. They could never really put a good squad around him, and he lost a lot of years where he probably could have led a team to a championship. But it's the same thing with Hakeem. I think even more egregious with Hakeem because, I mean, they never really put anyone around him. They put an old Clyde Drexler around him eventually.
Yeah,
I mean, but even then, it was a well-balanced team. You know, the first one even that he won a title with, but it was like him and Otis Thorpe and Kenny Smith, just a couple of good rookies, you know, your young guys, I should say, and Orion Cassell. Like it wasn't a great team. He never played with another superstar until he got like washed Drexler, washed Barkley, washed Pippen, whatever. But that just kind of goes under the radar for whatever reason. But yeah, man. So we don't know what he could have been. One other one we were talking about Biggs is Kareem. I think that's going to be the first one that comes to everybody's mind when we're talking about the length of primes, especially when we're talking about Biggs. Now, and he's another one where, okay, so he won the MVP in 1980 at age 33. Yeah. That's another one though, where it's like, are we comparing him to everyone else that's played? Because yeah, sure. He's an MVP caliber player. He's unbelievable still in 1980. But if we compare him to 70s Kareem, it's hard to say that he's still in his prime, which is crazy because he won the MVP. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say he started to decline at like 31, and he was just that good that he could still pull off an MVP.
Oh yeah, like he's still great into the mid 80s, but he's like all NBA player, like great, not all time, you know, prime Kareem, prime LeBron, prime Jordan level great like he is in the early and mid 70s. He's not that guy anymore. I think that's how we have to look at it. I think we have to compare these guys to their previous selves. Like whether we're talking about Kareem or even LeBron, like, yeah, he's still great. He's right now. He's like, you know, even if this was as good as he'd ever been, he's still like a top 15 player of all time or something like that. Like even if this was his, you know, his peak, but it's not, it's not, he's not the best he's ever been. No, it's not close.
Well, let me not get too far off topic here, though. I know you said also you looked at guards and wings. So Biggs hit it earliest and come out of it the soonest.
Yeah, but some bigs like Hakeem, Dikembe Mutombo is another one who they have these elongated, they have these stretched out bits at the end where kind of a lot of guys fall off. By the time they reach their mid-30s, they've fallen off completely. But there are some like Hakeem, like Dikembe, like Kareem we just mentioned. They have this tail to their prime, which is actually quite rare among a lot of these guys. Like apart from these bigs, it's like Malone and LeBron are like the only players that really have this kind of tailing to their prime.
So let me stop you there. There's two things that I see when we mention these guys. Yeah. Okay, one applies to LeBron, Malone, and Kareem. They take care of their bodies better than anybody. They're known for that. Kareem certainly was. Obviously, Malone was. Obviously, LeBron, $1.5 million a year on his body, is known for taking care of his body. I think with those guys, that explains it. That's a pretty logical explanation. With Mutombo and Hakeem, these are guys that came to basketball late. Okay, and in the case of Mutombo, came to the NBA late. I believe Mutombo was like 25 as a rookie.
Yeah, I think he was.
Hakeem was probably 22 as a rookie, something like that, 23. He didn't come in super young, but with him, and I think Mutombo as well, they picked up basketball really late. So that's where when you talk about Hakeem sort of learning the game well into probably the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
on the fly as he's in the NBA. I think that's what that is. And I wonder how much of an effect that has on their career trajectory, like in terms of their prime. Like if you look at some other guys that sort of came into basketball late, like it would make sense that their best version would come a little bit later. So look out for Rui Hachimura when he's like 30 years old, man. When he puts it all together.
Yeah,
No, he's a guy that came late too, but
some players do. But
that just popped into my head when you said
yeah.
Mutombo and Olajuwon. That was
because there are these clear similarities. There was, I can't think of off the top of my head, but there was another kind of big defensive player who was like that, who was still good into their 30s, like a Mutombo or a Hakeem, just on a lower level. But so those are bigs, but generally speaking, bigs peak slightly earlier. Like I put down, a general kind of prime is about 23 to 29. Bear in mind, for all players, it's about 24 to 30. Now, for wings, it's actually probably the longest prime, but it doesn't generally go into the 30s, and it's about 23 to 30 is about a wing's prime. And I actually found that for a lot of hyper athletic wings, they generally peak about 23 to 25 kind of era. I'm talking Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, I think Dr. J in the ABA years. He was another name I remember. And that would also actually fit with someone like Zach LaVine right now, may well be in his actual prime right now, because he's a hyper athletic wing who's, I think, 25 years old.
25, maybe 26. And I'll tell you, man, I'm a huge LaVine fan. It is hard to imagine him being better at 30 than he is now.
Yeah.
I think that's because of the nature of his game and because of sort of that historical precedent that you mentioned about these hyper athletic wings. It's like, I mean, unless you totally reinvent yourself, like maybe Ray Allen would be an example of that, where I think he was 32 when he came to the Celtics and obviously wasn't still in his prime, but like the season before that, he had lost a lot of his athleticism and was still pretty much as good as he'd ever been, but he kind of reinvented himself. And that's rare. I'm not sure that someone like LaVine will do that. I don't think Dr. J did it. It's not like Dr. J ever became a great shooter or something.
No. Another one is James Worthy, actually. James Worthy absolutely peaked in like that 87.
He fell off.
Yeah, he fell off.
He was, like by like 91, he was pretty ordinary, wasn't he?
Yep. And he was like, watching those old Showtime Lakers, I'm like amazed by his speed. He is like lightning in a bottle, that man, when he's younger. And he's like 24 and he is just destroying people. And then by the time
Showtime ain't Showtime without him. Like Showtime is not Showtime without James Worthy and his speed in the open court and his ability to get out on the break, man. He was such an important part of that.
And by 1991, he's 29 and he's washed basically. He is not an all-star.
Was he like 15 and 8 or something? Yeah. I don't even know.
Nothing.
But he wasn't an all-star. Yeah.
No. And then you got like Penny Hardaway was another one, but he has injuries, but Well,
and that's with so many of these guys too. And that's something, we should probably mention. It's like when we talk about these guys that had short primes, right? Because I was sort of looking for some instances of this beforehand, and it's almost all injuries. And it's like, how long would their primes have been if it wasn't for injuries? And how much do these guys, and there's a lot of them, whether it's Grant Hill or Penny or Jermaine O'Neal or Chris Webber or Steve Francis or Baron Davis, T-Mac, Vince didn't have too many injuries, but you go down the list and all these guys that have injuries, like how much does that sort of skew our perception of the average length of a prime? Or it makes it seem like these 8-10 year primes, like something maybe that like Jordan had or LeBron, these really Malone, Olajuwon, like that they're rare, and they are in a sense, but it's like if you take injuries out of the equation, the average prime is a lot longer, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just surviving that injury. Like I haven't really looked at kind of how many it's one thing I want to do, like kind of looking at like going back and looking through a load of draft reviews, kind of picking out who were meant to be the stars, how likely were they, what percentage of these guys are getting injured and getting their, so we're losing, say, like a third of our talent pool every draft, like every load of drafts, we're losing like, a quarter of the players who should become all-stars aren't because of injuries, something like that. That's something I really want to look at, is in regards, and I did find that more with the hyper athletic wings, because like you say, like, can Levine be better than he is? Because right now he is getting to the cup at will. Like, no one can stop him when he takes that first step. Like, when there's like a dribble handoff and he's going, through the lane, no one can stop him right now. That's not going to be the same when he's 29, 30. And you think, can he be
No.
better than that?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. Again, he's just going to have to reinvent himself a little bit, but I would say the odds are that he won't be. That we're looking at, and you got to wonder how much the Bulls are going to be thinking about that when it comes time to re-sign him. How much do they want to be paying him when he's 31? So that's definitely going to be something to consider. But I mean, he'll still be great. But it's like there's a very good chance that this is the best this year and probably next year. 20, 25, 26, 27.
Yeah,
best version of Zach that we're going to see.
Yeah, I think so. And then moving on to guards. Guards were actually much more interesting, I think, than bigs and wings, because generally with bigs and wings, I found that the super athletic guys like Dwight, Shaq, kind of Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, these guys tended to skew younger with their primes. Guards actually, they skew about the right point to peak level, but their primes start at about 25 generally. Guards actually are reaching their peak level later than wings or bigs. The only real exception to this rule I found was Isaiah Thomas, the OG Isaiah Thomas, who was like at his prime when he was like 23, 24, and then obviously was still great for the championship years, but wasn't his peak. But you look at guys like Steve Nash, I think, peaked later. Someone like Jason Kidd was in this kind of range, peaking slightly later. You had
Kyle Lowry.
Kyle Lowry, yeah, that's a great one. He absolutely peaked a lot later. The guys like Gary Payton, I think, was probably on the later side in terms of his peak.
He was probably 26 before he really got into his prime. He was probably he was 27, 28 by the time they played the Bulls in the 96 finals.
He was 27. And I would say his best years were like that, and like the next 2 years were like his best years.
Statistically, certainly, yeah.
Another
one is Lillard even. I mean,
Lillard is, he's the current example of that, I think.
He's 30, going on 31, and he's as good as he's ever been. And I mean, he's kind of been ramping up to this since 25, 20, like 26, like the last 3-4 seasons. He definitely got into his prime late, and he hasn't started to slow down. He's an interesting one.
So this is something that generally hit. I generally like these guys are peaking later. They're starting to really peak at about 25, and then actually a lot of them are hitting their peak very soon after that. Like they're reaching like 25, bang, I'm hitting my peak level. That's like Steph reaches 25 in 2014, and he's like an all NBA player. 27, bang, 20 is 2016 year. He's at his peak. Russell Westbrook, I think, is the same. It's like 2016 or 2017. He's at his peak and then decline off. But it does still happen that guys peak later, going on later. Like I say, Steve Nash, Chris Paul, I think his Clippers years were his best years, even though statistically the New Orleans years were the best statistically. I think LA Clippers, those runs where they should have made the final maybe, or really challenged for the final, those were his peak years, and those were like 30.
And a lot of these guard examples are high IQ players. And that's obviously something you're going to find more frequently when you're looking at guards than bigs, say. And to go back to what we were saying in the beginning, that's so much of this kind of longevity, like being able to extend your prime, into your 30s, is you've got to be a smart player and a savvy player. And so I think when you look at guards that say aren't necessarily that, Steve Francis is an example. Now, he had some injuries that definitely wore him down, but he was already starting to decline because you start taking away a little bit of his athleticism and he fizzles out. Allen Iverson, another example. By 31, 32, I guess, he was no longer Allen Iverson. He fell off a cliff like a few others.
Yeah.
Because again, and he didn't have a major injury, nothing catastrophic. It may have been some nagging stuff, but
no, it's just,
you know,
yeah,
you take away a little bit of his quickness. That was so much of his game was quickness rather than savvy, you know, and obviously he had all the heart in the world. It's cliche to say at this point, but you can only do so much with that heart when you start to get robbed of your quickness.
Yeah.
So it's like those savvy guards are going to last a lot longer. And I think when we look at guards, so many more of them are savvy players compared to other positions.
Yeah.
And that kind of explains it. And then just probably take less of a beating on the court generally.
They generally,
because less weight on the knees.
Yeah, because that's something I've noticed. You know, I'm like turning 30. Is it this year? Might be this year or next year. And like a lot of the people my age, like complaining about knees, but I've always been short. My age, and like my knees are great. Like my knees are fine. I'm good. Like I've still got good leg. Like I can, you know, run around and shit. I'm not really that fussed, but I know people my age or like a couple of years older than me, they're having to, you know, ice their knees and shit. And because they're like, you know, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". And I'm like,
that's where I'm at, man. Yeah. If I was still playing ball, I would definitely be icing my knees. I've been just preserving them, man. All these years I haven't been playing. I think there's something to that, and also back injuries and are way more common with taller players. So it makes sense. You get a guy like John Stockton, like he's not just going to physically break down. He's another guy who came into his peak a little bit later.
I think. Yeah,
and he sustained it. Until he was. I think he was legitimately in his prime at like age 35.
Oh, anyway, no, I think he was a legit starting level player till he was like 40. Like I think him.
But if you look at, he's small and the nature of his game and the savvy, all of these components, you know, of the equation that we've sort of talked about, he kind of had them all. Yeah. He was like built perfectly to just last and just maintain this consistent prime where, you know, he's just, you know what you're getting.
Yeah. When you look at someone like Oscar Robertson, who is more built on these physical tools and is probably like far more talented than someone like John Stockton ever could be. But in terms of maybe, you know, IQ on the court, John Stockton's probably a bit more intelligent than Oscar. Oscar just trounces him in so many physical and talent-based skills. But he peaks in like, you know, he's 25. Like when he wins the MVP, he's 25. And that's about his peak when in like 1964.
By age 29, he was already falling off. Like what was he the year with the Bucks? Like 31?
31, I think. And
he seemed ancient. I think we've talked about this before and how funny that is. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Got Bush? I'll bet you do if you're not using the life-changing. Yeah, I said it, life-changing products from our sponsor, Manscaped. I cannot say enough good things about these products. They are simply wonderful. What I can say is that if you haven't already, you should try them out. If you have not used these products, you are missing out. But the good thing is that we can offer you 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com by using the promo code OVERSTATED, OVERSTATED, just like the name of this podcast. Again, that's 20% off plus free shipping. That is a tremendous value. That's like a rookie scale contract, to put it into NBA terms. But once you get to manscaped.com, what I would recommend going with is what they call the Perfect Package 3.0. And it is quite literally that. It is a perfectly packaged assortment of goodies, including lotions, the crop preserver, ball deodorant. What's ball deodorant? I didn't know I need ball deodorant. Well, you do. Take it from me. A couple of free gifts like these ridiculously comfortable boxer shorts that I just recently got around to trying on for the first time, and now I want more. Also a high-end travel bag to put everything in, including the star of the show, which is the Lawnmower 3.0. That's Manscaped's trimmer designed specifically for male grooming. It is a wonderful tool. Does it have an LED light that's super helpful? Sure does. Is it waterproof? Sure is. You can use that thing in the shower. Does it employ Manscaped's advanced skin-safe technology to prevent nicks and cuts? Oh, you better believe it. Oh, and that skin-safe technology is a game changer for real. It's like the Steph Curry, Draymond Green pick and roll, like for real, changing the game, not having to worry about nicks and cuts anymore. It is a whole new world, a whole new level of trust. Again, the code is overstated. OVERSTATED. The website is manscaped.com. The discount is 20% plus free shipping. Do yourself a favor, check it out, use our discount. You will not regret that decision. All right, back to the podcast. It's not to put you on the spot here, but do you have any idea about how different a prime looks now compared to the mid 1960s or something? Like, would you say that primes are starting later and going later now, or just longer in general? Like, I mean, it would make sense.
Yeah, generally I did do this. I don't think I have the graph anymore, but I did take like a huge sample. I can't remember. It was like 1,000 seasons of players drafted before the merger and players drafted after the merger. And I kind of made put them next to each other on a graph to be like, right, this is how well you're performing over the years. And this is the rise and decline. I found generally guys pre-merger, like the peak was like 26, 27. And then by 30, you're already in your decline. Whereas for players post-merger, it's actually closer to 28 or 29 is peak level, like the top of the mountain. And then the fall off is a lot slower. So it conforms, I think, with what we are expecting. And that, like I said at the start, you hit physical peak at about 26, and then it's maintaining that, not losing it. And, back in the early days, they could only maintain it for about a year or two. Then the drop off starts to happen, and, they've left their peak prime level. Whereas now we can maintain that for maybe 2 or 3 years. That kind of stopped the decay of the body.
Yeah.
Which is terrible to think, because I'm like, shit, that was like 3 years ago. Fuck. I'm like, fuck.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a few guys I think that are good examples of that. Obviously, LeBron is the main one. I mean, he's still a freak athlete. And even a couple years ago, I think you could say he was 95% as athletic as he'd ever been. And now he's a little less than that, but he's still unreal. I think Westbrook is another one that just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
Because Russ he's 32, I believe now, probably getting close to 33. And I don't know if you saw the dunk he had the other night, but oh my gosh. It was on Biyombo, I think.
Yeah.
I want to say, oh my gosh.
He is.
So I haven't seen any decline in his athleticism, and he's got a guy whose whole game is predicated on athleticism, and a guy who's had a lot of injuries, a lot of surgeries, more than people realize, and has taken a lot of hard falls and plays harder than anybody in history. And yet here he is at 32 doing shit like that. It doesn't even make sense. He might be the most extreme example of somebody who's been able to sustain that athletic peak that you reach at 26 or whatever. And he's essentially sustained it for another 6 years, which flies in the face of all historical precedent.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's not just that, because if it was just him by himself, I'd be like, oh, maybe it's just he might already be the greatest athlete guard ever. But I'd just be like, I think he's the most athletic player in NBA history. I've said that before. I posted about that. I think if I had to say, I think he's the most athletic player in NBA history. I think, you'd have to go. You have to go like
speed,
him,
strength, jumping.
Yeah, you'd have to go him or LeBron realistically. But I get, because he's in.
I wouldn't argue against LeBron
because he's in such a much smaller package. But it's not just that he's doing that; it's that he's doing that, and he's had ever since the Pat Bev collision. He's had knee surgeries every offseason, basically since then. He's constantly getting a knee surgery since then. And I think I've already said this, I think on the podcast, that in 2017 or 2018, one of his trainers came out and was like, look, he knows he's only got 3 or 4 years left, and then his athleticism is going to be gone because of these knee injuries are chronic. That's why he needs to get surgery on them every year, because they fucking hurt like hell.
Yeah.
he just
You'd
keeps going.
expect to see some decline.
Yeah.
Like if that was going to be the case where like if he's on the brink of a precipitous fall off,
Yeah.
like you would expect to see some kind of gradual decline and I haven't seen it and it's just wild cuz yeah, he's taken a lot of physical
Yeah.
pounding in the NBA and just I mean, like I've been expecting like an Iversonian fall off for Westbrook, and it would have happened by now. By the time Iverson was this age, it was
Oh
happening to
yeah.
him,
Oh
and
yeah.
he wasn't. You know, they're different players and different levels of athlete, but that's kind of what I expected. I thought Dwayne Wade was going to hit that too, and he sort of did, but it came a little bit later than I thought. And I think a lot of that was his just his savvy, his intelligence, his
Yeah. Yeah.
being able to
Yeah.
figure it out even when he's not as athletic. But
Yeah. Although
um,
he was still slightly, I can't remember how old he was because like 2009 is kind of real peak Wade after his first or maybe his second big injury. He hits his peak, and that's 27. And then by
yeah, yeah,
2012, he is not the same player LeBron
no,
joined,
no,
and
no,
he's 30, and he is not the same guy.
clearly out of his prime.
Yeah.
Still a good player. Like, yeah, I mean, but it essentially did happen to him too, and it'll be interesting to see how long Russ can keep this up.
Yeah.
But we had this kind of uncharted territory. I mean, it makes sense that guys are playing longer now and extending their primes. But
Yeah, we know.
I think LeBron is the ultimate example, and
Hmm.
that's one where it's like I think a lot of people would say he's still in his prime.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
And again, man, like yeah, if you compare it to his 2013
Hmm.
or anywhere in that range, he's not that quite that player. So in that sense, it's not his prime, but he's still playing at an MVP level, and that's where it's kind of like, how do we distinguish, where the prime ends
Hmm.
exactly when it's so gradual and so subtle with LeBron? It's like a
Hmm.
subtle decline. Like you almost don't notice. Yeah, I guess what you like. I think the other day, not the other day, the other month or something was like the anniversary of his career high, like 61 point game against Charlotte. And I made a little post about it. And before I posted about it, I went back and watched the extended highlights of that game. And that's kind of what it took for me to be like, okay, he's not what he was then. Cause that was like, okay, this is a different player. He's still awesome. But again, that speaks to the subtlety of his
Yes.
decline, and that's where it gets hard to draw a line. When it's somebody like Shaq or even like Duncan, it's pretty easy to just, you can look at their basketball reference page and kind of point, okay, it's right there. With LeBron, it's tough, man, and that's where that line
Yeah.
is definitely blurred, and I think that just
Yeah.
speaks to how he's like few others in history.
Yeah, I think right now LeBron he's kind of like he's like Wile E. Coyote and he's run off the cliff. Because like at this point at 35, like I did do some research. Like I think Steve Nash is actually a great example. He was 35 in 2010. He was still very
LeBron's
good.
actually 36
He's
now.
36 now. I just meant the last full season we had with
Oh
him.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Yep.
then Wilt was really good in 72. That's actually when they won the championship, him and Jerry West. Yes, it was 72. Yes, that's when they won the championship, him and Jerry West. He was still very good. That was LeBron last year. This year,
Mm-hmm.
it's basically like we're talking 2000 Karl Malone. We're talking like even older Wilt. Those are his only contemporaries, and neither of those were close to an MVP level player at 36. And they're like them, like Kareem wasn't close to an MVP level player. Tim Duncan,
Duncan,
not
oh,
close.
no,
Like Hakeem, not
no.
close. That's what I mean. Where like if you put like
Well,
every
Dirk at 36, no, not even. I don't even
no,
know if he was an all-star caliber player at
no,
36.
no, I don't think so. No, you get
That
like
would have been like what 2014. Yeah, no way.
yeah, no, yeah, and you get like Kevin Garnett, like no, John
No, no,
Stockton he's like a starter level player, but no, like there's
no.
not
I
really
don't even think
like
he's in this conversation. Yeah,
old Reggie
no.
Miller. Like, yeah, like LeBron is going to be a step above. He's already proved at 36 he is a step above what any other 36-year-old is going to be. And at this point, it keeps getting worse because then you get to 37, you get even older Stockton, older Karl Malone.
I don't even think there's a 37-year-old in the league right now. Like, I don't know.
No, I don't
Definitely
know
not a 38-year-old. I don't know if Tyson Chandler or Kyle Korver's floating around. I don't think they are
if
though.
they've stepped on the floor this year or not. Yeah, I don't know
And
actually.
it's like he's like last year. I remember saying like he's the age that Jordan was in his final year with the Bulls, even probably slightly older. But now he's definitely older than Jordan ever was in a Bulls uniform, and he's I don't know. I don't want to say he's better than Jordan was in '98, but he's definitely at that level, and that's Michael Jordan.
You want to know the 10 guys around LeBron right now in age, 10 closest guys
in the NBA.
In the NBA, you got
Yeah.
So you got Dwight Howard. Bear in mind that right now I'm starting guys that are younger than LeBron. Dwight Howard, Taj Gibson, Jared Dudley, Trevor Ariza, LaMarcus Aldridge, JJ Redick. Then LeBron is fourth oldest. Then Marc Gasol, Carmelo Anthony is second oldest, and Iguodala is the oldest at 37. That is a washed team.
That is all those guys are so old.
They're so old and they're so bad. And you think Jared Dudley is just there waving the towels on the sideline, and he's younger than LeBron.
He is an old guy, man.
Old.
Taj Gibson is old as fuck.
Right? Old as fuck. Like Gasol
that is so
washed.
Crazy.
Like Melo has been washed for years at this point.
Hey. That's my guy. But yeah, dude, no, that's funny. That list, those are old guys. And then you have LeBron, 26, 8-8, MVP candidate, if not for the injury, of course.
Yeah. I mean, that LeBron Mafia was definitely driving the narrative that he was the MVP.
He would have finished, if he had never got hurt, he definitely would have finished top 3 in voting. He would have just maybe top 2. Maybe he would have won it. Who knows? He wouldn't have been my MVP, but
no, but he's absolutely one of the 5 best players this regular season, though.
Yes,
like absolutely.
Yes,
and that is
like he's a better player right now this season than probably a couple guys that I'd have ahead of him in the MVP. That's a whole nother conversation, though. Yeah. We've talked about a lot, but So anyway, I mean, he's probably not. And you can't say he's in his prime at age 36, but he had a long ass prime. Would you say he has the longest prime in NBA history, the longest true prime?
Yes, I would absolutely say he had the longest true prime. Because it depends, like, when do you want to start a prime? Because, like, I think LeBron's actual prime is from, like, 2009 to 2018. I think that's his actual, like, peak level is from about, and I think it ends at about there. Because then in 2019, he has the injury. It breaks his combo of like amazing seasons after another. I think, but it depends because like at 22, 23, he's taken teams to the NBA finals. So I mean,
even in like 2006, like he didn't have a squad really, but like he averaged 31 points a game.
Yeah.
That was the highest mark of his career. And it's like, it's hard to say that's not part of his prime. Yeah. And I mean, I think we could safely say, if we wanted to, again, this is where it gets a little arbitrary, a little subjective, but I'd probably say it started in his 3rd season. Definitely not his 1st, definitely not his 2nd, but I think the 3rd, there's an argument there. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I think I'd say probably his last year in Cleveland maybe would be like a fair endpoint.
Yeah.
To his prime. So that's like 05, 06 through 17, 18.
At the same time, though, I think LeBron is better in 2020 than he was in 2006 or 2007. Like, I think if you
that's interesting. Yeah,
I think he is better. In which case, is 2020 part of his prime? Like,
right.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because he is so much smarter now.
Yeah,
he is better. That's a very good and important point. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm just looking at the numbers here, getting caught up in that a little bit. But honestly, he is significantly better now than he was at least 21, 22.
Yeah.
Third, 4th year. Right. So, but then it's like, well, if that's not, then is this his prime? Or do we just really have to narrow it down
to be,
get a little more specific to where it's like maybe his last year in Cleveland through the championship year, the 2nd time in Cleveland, something in there with the Miami years. Like, I think if you had to make a convenient peak or short 4-year prime, I think the Miami years are a pretty good thing to
Mhm.
look at. Like that was probably
Well,
his best version.
well, remember I said the 27 to 29 is like the golden point. That is like peak, peak, peak. Like 90% of players will peak in that season, in those seasons. That is LeBron 2012 to 2014, and that is
Yeah.
Jordan 91 to 93. And so
Yeah, it holds pretty true, man.
it is. That's, Magic from 87 to 89. That's a fun one, actually. Larry Bird was 27, 28, and 29 when he won his 3 MVPs in a row.
Wow.
That's, yeah.
Wow.
It encompasses Kobe's 2006, 2007, and 2008. It was when he was 27 to 29. So it's, it does fit, like, it works on two
So
players.
Giannis and Jokic are about to
Yeah.
they're probably just entering their best
Mhm.
3-4 year stretches.
Yeah. And I think
Sounds about right.
for those
It's just hard to
guys as
imagine
well,
them being even better than they are now.
I mean, because I went and looked, because obviously we have like the best players in the league right now. So we've talked about LeBron enough. That's like one of the superstars. I think Durant and Steph, they're both 32. I think with
Steph
injuries,
just turned 33.
he just turned 33.
I know you're talking like season.
Yeah,
like
yeah, I'm
this
talking
is
like
32.
season. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is 33.
But Steph's about 6 months older
Yeah.
than KD, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's crazy when he was drafted 2 years later as well. But
Yeah.
KD's a monster. But yeah, I think they're probably both on their way out of their prime, where like they're not going to have any seasons going forward that are going to be as good as the ones that have come before them, if that makes sense. Like just based on what's happened, I think they're both still going to be like all NBA players for probably a few more years. I think this was their last chance for both of them to really compete for like MVPs, or like maybe even be a championship player, like the best player on a championship team. It might well be that like next year or the year after, we're like, shit, they can't do this anymore. Like,
I see it happening with Steph sooner, and not just because he's a little bit older. I think, I mean, he's playing at, I guess you could say he's playing at an MVP level. Like if the Warriors were, a top 3 seed and he was playing exactly how he's playing with the exact numbers, sure, you could say that. So that's fine. Durant's a bummer, man, because like he was probably my MVP when he got hurt. I think he was the best player in the league this season. And it's just, he has been out for so long that we've all kind of forgotten what a marvelous season he was having coming off a fucking Achilles and a year away from the NBA. Like, it's so wild how good he was. And I'm not saying he was better than he was in 2014, but God, he was close. I mean, he was almost as good as he's ever been. Better than a lot of those super young years, like kind of like it is with LeBron.
Yeah.
Like this year, even post Achilles, I think he was better than he was his first 3 years anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a shame, because this is turning into another lost season. And I know, look, that's not going to be the case if he's back healthy for the playoffs and the Nets, go to the finals or something. It's still a very meaningful season, but man, we've lost a great regular season from KD, and it really is a bummer. And, but I wouldn't rule him out for like next year. If he's 100%, I don't see him being any less than he's been this year. I just think he's so tall and he's such a great shooter and he's so smart. He's got like this combination of things. And yes, he had a major injury, but he's so light, like that. I don't know. I could see him kind of staying healthy and just doing his thing for a while. I could see him being like an MVP caliber player at like age 35, 36. I really could.
See, he is an interesting one. Yeah. Cause like all that stuff you say is right about him. Like he's very atypical for someone who's like 6'10", 6'11", because he probably weighs less than even a lot of like 6'5" players weigh now, honestly. But he's come off, the worst injury, and he's come back looking better than maybe anyone ever has. But it's still the worst injury, and like we're seeing with injuries going forward, you need to be extra careful with him.
Yeah.
And maybe he picks up a few more nagging injuries now than he would have before. We don't know. I'm hesitant to think that with the injury, he's still going to play at this level going forward. Whether that means it's next year he starts falling off, or even the year after, I think it's going to happen now sooner than it would have done without the Achilles injury. I think that's probably the best way for me to put it. Like I
No,
just
that's fair. And looking at this list, those are the guys, like, other than LeBron, who again we've talked about a lot. Yeah, it would be, those are age wise and
Mhm.
just sort of career wise, the ones that seem like they'd be the next to decline. Then Harden is 31.
but
Again,
I think
weird game,
mhm.
should age really well.
Yeah.
I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. I
No,
think we've
yeah.
still got like 3 more years of
Mhm.
like prime Harden. Honestly, he's certainly well within his prime at age 31, and
Yeah.
I could see at least a couple more years before we say, okay, maybe he's out of his prime.
Yeah.
Dame, I think this could be the best.
This could
He
be.
might not get any better than he is
I mean, it
now.
could
I think
also
he's
be
better than
last
he
year.
was.
Well, it could be
What's that?
It could be last year
Eh,
as well. I'm not sure. Do I think he's better this year than last year? He was awesome
I think
last
it's
year.
about the same.
It's
For
about the
me,
same.
about the same.
So
It's about the
we are
same. Very
probably at his
close.
absolute peak here, like 29,
Negligible
30.
difference.
Yeah.
Either last season or this season was his absolute peak, because last season was certainly his best season ever.
Yeah.
And then I think he sort of plateaued. I mean, at an MVP level this season. And I could see him he's a small guy, fairly reliant on his quickness. I mean, I don't know. He's still going to be awesome. I don't think he's just going to fall off. He works too hard. He's too smart. He'll adapt. But this might be like his last best shot to win MVP, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
But I think with a guard, I do think he's got another couple years where he'll still be, maybe he'll take a tiny dip next year, but he'll still be basically this level. And I think he's got a good chance, not maybe as good a chance as Harden, because Harden is just built thick and he is a super intelligent player on the court and his game is super efficient. Like just a movement is super efficient in Harden. Like Harden's greatest physical attribute is his ability to slow down. And like that's gonna, I think, help Harden going forward. So I don't think Dame is gonna quite, Harden, I'm saying maybe he is still amazing at 34. He is still
Harden's going to be I love Dame. He's my favorite player, but Harden's going to be a better 34-year-old than Dame.
Yeah.
But but the thing with both of those guys is they've both been remarkably durable. Mm-hmm. They've missed very few games throughout their career. They've never had a major injury, knock on wood. So that is going to work in their favor too. And I agree about Dame. Like, all I'm saying is he's probably never going to be better than he is now.
No, I agree.
Or last season or whatever.
I think
but it's not going to be just like a fall off. Like next season, I bet he still averages 27 and 7 and is an all NBA player and stuff. Like he's not going anywhere. Don't get me wrong.
I think it's still the 33.
And then Jimmy Butler was kind of the other one in that age range of all those guys. Where
I didn't even have him. You put Jimmy Butler in there.
Yeah. Well, I went 15. I wrote down 11. Like my top 15.
So that's probably
Yeah, I put a few bonus ones in there. We've got a few more minutes here, man, before we got to get going. But I know something I think we should talk about is and I know you did a little bit of research about this. Mm-hmm. Like, when can we expect some of these younger guys that aren't in their prime yet to hit their prime or their peak, however you want to do that? So when we're talking about, the obvious ones, Tatum, Zion, Luka, all pre-prime based on their age. Luka and Zion, no question, they're not in their prime yet. And I don't think Tatum is either at just turned 23. Mm-hmm. When we look at these guys, especially these young guys, like when can we expect their best version to appear?
So just to touch on the three youngest guys who are probably still MVP candidates, I think Embiid, I think this is probably his actual prime because he's 26. He's a big man. He's not healthy. I think this will be his last. This might be me being conservative. I think this is going to be his best year ever. I think he's never going to eclipse this because I think he reaches 27, 28, 29. Injuries will really start to settle in. He'll be too old. Giannis should peak next year or the year after. That should be absolute peak. Like Giannis that can take the Bucks to the title should be next year or the year after, just based on the data we have. Jokic should be in 2023, should be his prime until from about 2019 to about 2025 should be his prime. I'm penciling him in as a guy that can play later than that. A bit kind of Harden-esque.
Well, and I think the I'm glad you mentioned them next to each other. The Giannis and Jokic is an interesting one because they're essentially the same age. I think they're almost exactly the same age. I know they're both 26 right now.
Yeah.
And so, but if you look at the nature of their games, right now, I think Jokic is going to age better. He's a lot less reliant on his physical gifts, obviously.
Mhm.
He can shoot the ball, obviously. He can pass the ball better than Giannis, even though Giannis is a good passer. And that's not to say Giannis can't reinvent himself as maybe like a true big man. Okay, that's what I've always wanted for him. I don't know if he'll do that, but I think that would probably be his best path to longevity because I don't think he's ever going to become a great shooter or even a good shooter. But based on what we've seen thus far, I would expect Jokic's prime to go at least a couple years longer than Giannis's, and that lines up with what you said, where Giannis's best season's probably going to be next season, maybe the year after. Jokic's could be a few years down the road.
Yeah, I think it will probably be closer to 30, honestly. It might even be like Dirk, where he has his best year when he's like 31 or something, just because...
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, just because he's learned the game that much better. Yeah. He has no reliance on his athleticism, unlike Embiid or Giannis.
We've got a lot of good Jokic years ahead of us, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think one that's kind of might shock people is someone like Zion. I want to hit on because I think Zion falls into what I said earlier. The potential of being like a hyper athletic wing who by the time he's 23, we're like, oh my God, this guy is an MVP candidate. So like 2024, we could be like, fuck, this guy is MVP candidate, top 5 player. Just imagine he's going to be the GOAT. Imagine how good he's going to be. And then 25 is actually his best year. Like 2026 is actually when he peaks. And then the athleticism just a tiniest bit gets cut off. And then he's not the same player anymore.
Even if we don't, even like, because everyone wants to talk about injuries with Zion, like let's assume he never suffers a major injury, which God, I hope that's the case. Even just with the natural slight decline in athleticism that takes place 26, maybe 27, but with somebody his size probably a little bit earlier, that could be enough to make it so, like you said, his best year could be 25. I mean, Zion's only 20. He turns 21 in July.
Yeah.
So he's going to be 21 next season, 22 the year after that, 23 the year after that. Like, so honestly, it wouldn't shock me if like 23, 24 was even his best season. I mean, this is so hard to say, but it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Tracy McGrady, Penny Hardaway.
Because think about how good he already is right now. Yeah. Like, I think he's a top 15 player in the league right now, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think.
Because I've never been the biggest Zion guy, but I really think he is. I put him in my top 15. I listed here. And and to think, okay, 3 years out is a ways. So it sounds crazy to say his best season might be his age 23 season, but that's not next season, not the season after that. It's the one after that. That's how young he is. So I could see that. I mean, I think he's certainly going to enter his prime early, and I hope he doesn't exit it early, but I think he's more likely to do that than anybody else on this list other than like Embiid, who's an obvious injury case.
Yeah, I think he is probably the closest to that. Whereas I think, and he was the only one of the young players I looked at that I bookmarked as, like Embiid, maybe his prime's going to go younger and cut younger, like a Dwight Howard kind of thing, like a Embiid possibly, or even Shaq. Like I said, like Shaq by 31 is not Shaq of 27.
Even Barkley's another one.
Yeah, Barkley.
Where it's kind of an early one. Like Barkley, pretty much, I'd say it ran from, about his age 27 season, or 26 maybe, like 80, maybe 88, 89, through his MVP season. But after that MVP season, he wasn't the same guy. No, he had a very short prime, but a very high peak. And I think him and, just a slight tangent, I think him and Karl Malone is an interesting debate. Yeah. Because they're very close in everybody's all-time rankings. And with Malone, you just have this incredibly long prime, probably second only to LeBron, honestly. The guy won an MVP at age 36. He was just about to turn 36 in 1999. And but then with Barkley, you just have this like 5-year, just unbelievable, better than Malone ever was, but then he kind of falls off. And they end up being about the same. I mean, neither of them won a championship. So they're like these very close guys in terms of like their rankings, but one had this long, steady, sustained prime, and another one had just this short, explosive peak. Yeah, and it's which do you favor? You could go either way. They each won an MVP. Malone won 2, but neither won a title. They're very similar in a lot of ways. Same era, obviously, same age, Yeah.
Yeah, and that could be the same for someone like Zion, and
Zion could be Barkley.
he could be Barkley, and someone like, you know, Tatum could be Malone.
Yeah.
He could go
Right.
Bam, could be Malone. They just go on forever, but they never have a
Yeah.
peak like Zion.
Yeah,
But
Tatum and Zion, I could see that being like
yeah.
a weird version of
Mhm.
Barkley Malone. That's pretty interesting. But speaking of, let's see, last two guys I want to kind of hear from with this is Tatum and Luka. I think those are the other than Zion, those are the, you know, well, I actually have them ahead of Zion, but those are the other guys in this conversation that are not yet in their prime.
Yeah. So I think Tatum is probably going to be a bit straightforward in the sense that, you know, he's not hyper athletic. Like he's athletic, but he's not hyper athletic. He's also got intelligence in his game. He's got skill in his game, which for me means it all points to the fact he's a very conventional kind of model of a superstar, if that makes sense. So I think 27, 28, 29, depending on how he develops mentally, it could be slightly later. I think 27 is probably going to be his absolute peak. And that would put it at 2026, which is also partly why I think what the Celtics are doing right now, just a tangent, why I think what the Celtics are doing right now is they're kind of fretting over nothing, because it's like you blew all this money on old stars to win with young rookie and second year, third year players with superstar upside. You slotted them with all stars. It didn't work out. The team blew up. Now Kemba is a negative value contract. You've just got Tatum and Jalen. You build now towards Tatum and Jalen's primes, which are going to be like 25, 26, you know, those type of years. They're still like 3 or 4 years away from that. You need to start building.
Away, yeah.
Yeah, you need to think of like, right, what has just happened from like 2017 to 2020? That was one era of Boston basketball. We're now entering a new era of Boston basketball where maybe we're not going to be good for a couple of years, even though we've got these young superstars, and we're looking to build a team that's going to peak when Tatum is ready to win championships.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're in a much better position than someone like the Bulls, who's probably looking to build around Levine and now Vooch, who are both probably at their peak right now. And it's like, but the Bulls are looking toward the future, and I hope these guys can hang on for a few more years while Patrick Williams develops, and we build around him and draft a couple more guys. Like, so that at least the Celtics have that cushion, I guess. The best way to describe it.
Yeah. I see them kind of coming in later. Like, I see if they can keep this together, I think Tatum and Jalen can be a juggernaut by like the 2024, 2025 season.
Yeah, they could be years from now.
Yeah, they could be a juggernaut team. And if, you know, Robert Williams, Peyton Pritchard, Grant Williams, if some of these guys keep developing, and then
Romeo Langford. I like that kid. I'm giving him a shout out. I'm excited about him. For some reason, I like his defensive versatility. I think he's going to be a nice piece for them. But anyway,
that's what you need though. You like a couple of those guys hit, sign a good free agent because they want to come play with Tatum and Brown, who are awesome, and then you're competing for championships again in like 3-4 years time. I think that's pretty realistic for this team, and it follows now. You're not on the trajectory where Tatum is your second, third option around Kyrie or Hayward or whoever. Tatum is now the centerpiece, and he's still 22.
Shift.
Yeah, he's still 22.
Like a seismic shift. Yeah.
So he needs to develop.
Last guy we need to hit on.
Now, Luka,
you know who it
is going to be just gushing about Luka because he is 21 officially. He's also, I think, earmarked as someone who's going to hit his prime later because, like Harden, his deceleration is the main physical tool he has, which separates him. He's big, but he's intelligent, like hyper intelligent.
Maybe the most intelligent. We did our Luka Gush Fest pod during the bubble, and I remember talking about that. How pretty much everything he does is based on his intelligence on the court. Everything he does is a product of his basketball IQ. And I mean, there's very few guys throughout history you can say that about for to be that good. When you're big, but he's not using quickness. He's not. It's IQ, man, and so that certainly works in his favor in this discussion.
And you think like I think we can both agree he's like one of the 11 best players in the league. Like we've named pretty much all of them, like Kawhi, AD, Dame, blah blah blah.
He's probably top 7, I think. I think it's crazy to have many lower than that. Yeah,
and he is 4 years younger than anyone else on that list. He's 21, and he's like, when I drew this out, like I, mapped out primes, I mapped out when players should get good. And you've got like at 20, you should still be pretty crap. He was a low MVP candidate. At 21, you take a jump up. At 22, you're meant to take another jump up. 23, you're meant to take another jump up. And then about 24, you hit your prime. And then your 24 to 30 is like that prime level. And then you hit your real peak at like 27, 28, 29, then 30, then 31, 32, 33, 34. You start to fall off. Like Luka is still 2-3 levels down from what he should be in his prime. Like that's the terrifying part of it, that he is crazy. He is like so much worse than he should be in his prime. Like you think 21-year-old LeBron is, like we said, 2006 LeBron. Like that's, and then you think how much better he got from there, and maybe Luka won't get that much better than that. But
you know what's interesting with these guys when we think about this? This just came to me, like, so this is a pretty consistent trend, right? Like hitting your prime at 24. LeBron did it. We know Luke is going to do it. But it's interesting because the ways that these guys get better vary quite a bit. Okay, like if I were to pinpoint something for Luka, what's going to take? Because this was another question we asked in that podcast. It's like, how much better can he get from this season? Yeah. This season being last season when we talked about it, and I think the thing that is going to be shooting with Luka, right? Now, but not all guys get better at shooting. Some guys, it's just like they find a way to get better, but it's in a different way. It's not that they're necessarily developing athletically. They don't all get better at shooting. They don't all get smarter. I guess you get smarter in a way, but it's different with everybody. But they all get there to that point of improvement. And yeah, I think with Luka, that's what it's going to be, because I think that's the obvious question. Is like, well, you're telling me he's 2 levels below what he's going to be in his prime. Or even when he enters his prime. And it's like, how's that like hurts my brain to think about, because he's so damn good already. But it's like his shooting percentages, they've gotten better over the course of this season, but overall they're not nearly, I don't think, where they're going to ultimately settle. And so, and there's other areas he can improve and will improve, and it's scary to think about, but he's going to keep getting smarter. Yeah. And it's just like, oh my God, what is 27-year-old Luka going to be like? Yeah. Like that is so far down the road.
Yeah. And I
don't even want to think about how old I'm going to be by the time Luka's 27. That's a long ways away.
No, I know. I plotted out, like, if he was 27, 28, let's say he ends up a year later at 28. That's 2028 where Luka is in. Like, we have just started the decade of Luka. We have only just begun the decade of Luka. And
indeed.
And he is like, when you add that, one thing I think is, like I mentioned this, I've been working on a GOAT trajectory and like, right, at what age were people the best? I actually think, fun, just to show how unbiased I am, I actually have the 21-year-old GOAT as Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe was the best player.
He was all NBA, I believe, as a 21-year-old.
Yeah, I think by 21, nice. He was the best player. Like, in terms of like, right, how good were you at 19, plus how good were you at 20, plus 21? I think Kobe had that up until 21. Then I think Shaq takes over at about 22, 23. But right now, I think Luka at age 20 was second behind Kobe. I think at age 21, he's third behind Shaq. Like this year, I think he's going to end up as like the third best player through their age 21 season. But looking at the guys, like the other guys who are in this discussion are like Kevin Durant, Magic Johnson, Tracy McGrady, LeBron James, Shaq, Kobe. Like the only guy there who isn't like a top 15, top 10 player ever is Tracy McGrady. And you might even say that some of that was because of injuries. Like, it's just, like he is absolutely on a trajectory, top 10, top 15 player ever.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I don't even know, man. Like
this is
Shaq at this age, I don't know. I mean, I think Luke is right there with Shaq, Kobe, whoever. I mean,
this
for
age.
sure.
Yeah,
for sure, man. He's unreal. He's having a great season. He just had kind of a slow start to the season. Came in out of shape, wasn't shooting the ball well. Mavs weren't playing particularly well. But I swear, I think I haven't even looked at this, but I bet if you take that first month or even first 3 weeks of the season out, his numbers are crazy. And like he's been playing really well. I mean, the guy's unreal, but the future is just, it's mind boggling to think about what it's going to look like for Luka.
How good. Well, just to Give you an idea. Since if you cut out the first month, he's shooting 41% from three, which
There you
is
go.
insane.
Yeah. There you go.
On 8
Yeah.
attempts per game, he's shooting 41%.
Elite.
Yeah, that's
Elite numbers. Okay, so yeah, when Luka's an elite shooter, then it's like, yeah, that's what takes him to the next level. So I mean, imagine if he can just be that all next season, then it's like that's another step, another level.
I think quietly as well, he might just end up being the only guy to challenge Magic as the greatest passer of all time. Because you think the age he is now, like compare his passing at 2021 to LeBron's.
Yeah.
Like he's already like nearly
Certainly
as
ahead.
good as LeBron.
What about the Joker though? Do you think
Yeah,
he can ever become a better passer than the Joker is?
I think so. I think he can.
You think he's pretty close now?
I think when you consider like his ability to attack, his ability as a kind of perimeter guard to attack, to draw double teams, I think if he's not better, I think just because of the position he plays, his ball handling, his ability to score is obviously better than Jokic's, even though Jokic's is underrated. You add that together, and it's like what I said on the rookie podcast. Like Jordan is not the passer Magic is, but he's probably creating more plays because he's scrambling defenses so much.
Right.
You know,
that's what Luka's doing.
Yeah, he's just scrambling defenses. Like right now, he is legitimately having one of the 10, 15 greatest seasons by creation. Like the amount of shots he's creating for teammates. The only guys who are better than him this year compared to this year are Magic and Steve Nash. They're the only guys that compare to him. And he's 21.
And the defense never knows what to do with him. And he just needs a little bit better of a team around him. I mean, the Mavs, that roster is not great.
No.
You know, he's another guy and he's so young. He's going to get that guy, especially with Dallas's ownership. And people are going to want to play with him. Who wouldn't want to play with Luka?
Yeah.
He's got to be so much fun to play with. So he's going to get that guy. And when that happens, you know, when he gets a squad around him, man, it's over. I mean, he's going to win multiple titles.
And they've got all the time in the world.
Just turned 22, I think. You know, it's scary to think about.
Yeah, he might still be in his prime in 2031. He might still be in his prime.
Oh yeah, his game's going to age well, man. Yeah. He's not. He doesn't barely leave the ground. I don't see any reason why he's going to have a bunch of injuries, and he's going to learn how to maintain his body better as he gets older as well. Like he's not. I don't think he comes into training camp out of shape next season. I think this was the last time that happens.
I think it was. I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was Mark Cuban actually who said this. I think on the Bill Simmons podcast where he said, because of everything that happened, Luka came into training camp, you know, they didn't know when it would start. He'd been in Slovenia, you know, getting fed by everyone. He came back like, you know, he had to get rushed into quarantine, rushed back into the facilities to get ready for the new season. And Cuban was like, you know, he knows that he cannot be out of condition again. Like
we're not going to see that again. I don't think, man. And just, you know, he's going to learn that as he gets older, and sports science and medicine is only going to get more advanced, and that's going to work in his favor as well. I mean, who knows, man? He could be in his prime at 35 for all we know at this point. We project.
You think how good Magic was after not playing for like 4 years, how good he was in 96. He was still pretty fucking good.
He was definitely like an all-star level player. Yeah.
Without playing for like 5 years. And that is kind of how good Luka could be, or even better than that. Cause you know, he won't have, you know, the same lifestyle, because Magic obviously led a crazy lifestyle, but was still at 31.
It's that same, they're both geniuses too, though. And it's like Luka's a basketball genius, much in the way that Magic was as well. And that's going to carry him for a long time, in addition to just all of his skills. But hey man, this is we're about out of time here, unfortunately. This was one of my favorite conversations we've had on this podcast, man. It was a good one, and
always
I hope everybody enjoys it.
Happy anniversary. It's our anniversary episode.
That is right. This is our 1 year anniversary, and I'd have to double check the dates, but I think when this one drops, I think it's going to have been exactly 1 year from when our first episode dropped. I think we timed it perfectly.
Yeah, it's every year plus a day. So we recorded it on the Sunday, and this is the Monday. It's almost exactly the same time as well that we recorded that very first episode.
Yeah. Hey man, that's perfect. That's I wish Steve could have been here. That'd be the only thing, but he'll be back next week, and maybe we can get him on a bonus episode or something
Yeah.
during the week. There was but just between the holiday weekend and I was a little under the weather one day, and we just just ended up doing it a day late. But again, man, fun pod. Hope everybody enjoys listening to it. Thank you everybody for listening, for the support. For showing us love for this past year. It's been a lot of fun. I never could have imagined, how successful this podcast has been. I mean, it just started out as a fun little thing. We didn't know what we were doing. And not that we're taking over the world or anything, but but it's come a long way. And it's just been great interacting with everybody and everything that's come with this podcast in terms of the Facebook groups and the communities and just getting to know you guys, Steve and Jacob. Like it's been awesome. So it's been a great year, man. It was one of the few really good things that came out of this pandemic, for me at least. So I don't know that we would have done this otherwise, but we were all just stuck at home and talking basketball, and we're like, why not?
Yeah,
why not do a podcast?
Do a podcast about basketball, and a year later we're reading Manscaped ads.
Shout out to Manscaped.
Shout out.
And again, man, big shout out to all the listeners. We couldn't do it without you. And hope you all have a wonderful week. And we'll be talking to you soon. Peace.